Hello and welcome to Simply Technical. We're back again. I think this is episode 10, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what I titled this on the recording. Episode 10. Keaton's again with me, or we're together, I guess. Like, we're not paying together, but we're together, like a podcast. But we're joined here again with Matt. It's been a little bit since Matt's been on, probably, 3 years?
Probably longer than that.
Maybe even longer than that. But glad to have you back on.
We had the live reaction of the NBA draft like 4 years ago.
And yeah, Kevin Love got traded, right?
Yes.
The famous Kevin Love trade that didn't actually happen. But yeah, so welcome back, Matt. We're excited to have you on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, fellas.
Of course.
Yep.
And Matt's in finance currently, right? Accounting.
Yeah, somewhat.
But
I fake my way. Fake it till you make it.
In the nighttime, he is a researcher. He researches a bunch of topics. And one of the things that we kind of want to talk about is BlackRock, which, for those that don't know, what kind of is BlackRock?
So BlackRock is like an asset management company. Most people, when they think of asset management company, think of like Fidelity. Fidelity is basically a firm or a fund where people invest money in their 401k. And then from there, Fidelity and BlackRock, Vanguard, companies of that nature will go in and take the money that you invested in them and invest into stocks. And they make their money by charging you like 3% of the 4,000 you invest or something like that. So that's essentially how these asset management companies work.
Yeah.
Well, they also, as they make you more money on the stocks they invest in, that 3% that they may take off the top gets a higher. The more they invest, more you make, more they make, more you pay. So that's essentially how they make money.
Okay. I've definitely heard of Vanguard before, and they're pretty popular, at least when it comes to 401ks. They're pretty mainstream. And I found out, we kind of talked about it a little bit before the podcast, but I kind of found out about BlackRock just through people like complaining that they were buying a bunch of investment properties when the stock or when the housing market was skyrocketing. I guess they do that as well, not just in stocks, but asset acquirement.
Oh yeah, we'll learn. They have their hands in everything, every industry, all kinds of things.
Do you know how much they have under management?
So their asset under management as of the end of 2022 was $10 trillion. So for reference, the U.S. GDP is 23 trillion.
Yeah.
The only country bigger than BlackRock was U.S. and China. Outside of that, they manage assets worth more than every other country in the world.
Wow.
I want to say next largest was Germany at 4 trillion. I may be missing the country here in there, but they were third in the world essentially.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more than that I have, currently, but it's close. We're neck and neck.
Plus, they're selling more switches.
Yeah. No, they just need to steal them. Okay. Well, what kind of are the large things that BlackRock, as a consumer, like, it was very alarming that they were buying so much property. Like, oh, they're going to control everything before the end of the year. What kind are they mainly in? I guess stocks, and then
so like the reason why people say that they kind of control the world and everything we do per se is they do own so much stocks in all these companies. For those who may not know a whole lot about stocks, when you own a significant share of a company's stock, you get what's considered to be part of on the board. Because all corporations, they're required to have a board of directors that always kind of manage and guide the overall, like they don't guide the day-to-day workings, but they say, hey, we want you to approach this strategy. So just I pulled a few that are pretty popular here. They own 4.25% of Apple, but that equates to $97 billion of Apple they own. Microsoft, they only own 4.5%, but that's $84 billion of Microsoft. Same with Google, 4.46%, 26 billion, Amazon 3.75%, 39 billion. It's kind of weird if you look across the industries and all they invest in, or how much they have in all these companies. It's only 4 or 5%, sometimes 7. But when you're looking at these companies that have, BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity, all these major asset firms investing in them, when you own 4 or 5% of a company, that is a significant share. So some of the other examples they have, I just got a kind of list here. I'll read off. Financial services, they own Chase, Visa, MasterCard. Medical, they have Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, United Health. They've got Conoco and Exxon in the oil and gas. They've got Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing in missile and defense. A lot of people also bring up the fact they own significant stakes in Fox, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times. So the reason why they kind of have this stigma around them that they, quote unquote, control everything is that they have board of directors on, both sides of the media, competing companies such as Pepsi and Coke, Unilever they own General Mills. I mean, you name it. They can essentially dictate the market based upon their findings from the board of directors. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's not direct market, but if they want to guide the overall strategy for an entire industry, they have the power and capability to do so.
Well, we're about to ask a question, Keaton.
Yeah. So I guess my main question is: Are they actually getting board seats? I figured lots of BlackRock's is like, since it's ETF based, or a lot of it is ETF based, it's like passive in most companies. There's just no way you could possibly sit on, because they're a major shareholder in every company in the S&P 500, naturally, kind of like Vanguard. And I guess Vanguard is similar structure as exact same structure as BlackRock, I guess. It's just BlackRock seems to be the one that we focus most on. I don't really know why, because I guess I've heard more. I always hear more about Vanguard, like investing wise, like, oh, I bought the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, but I don't even know what BlackRock's ETFs are. Like, they don't have like a BlackRock ETF, I don't think.
No, they do.
They do.
Because that actually goes back into, I kind of mentioned before the podcast, but BlackRock was consulted by the government both in the 2008 crisis and the 2020 crisis for the pandemic when the markets crashed. They got a no bid contract to advise the government on how to move forward and how to reset the market, essentially, when the market crashed so bad. So I can't speak for 2008, but in 2020, they got a $750 billion contract to basically invest into corporate bonds, invest into ETFs, and they got an exemption during that time to invest in their own ETF.
So they essentially propped the market, or partially propped the market up. That's one basically of the fuels behind it.
They have advisory services as well, so they act as an advisor. But like I said, they had an exemption, so they were allowed to advise, say, their clients to invest in certain stuff. Yeah. But they're also telling the government to invest in corporate bonds in the same notions at the same time. So it's wild when you look at it from that. They essentially, both times in the market crashes, they had free reign to kind of reset the market however they wanted to.
Yeah.
But yeah, from my understanding, they're allowed to be on the boards of other companies. Also, if you got to think, even if they aren't directly sitting on the board, one phone call, hey, I'll pull my $30 billion from your company if you don't do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And we all know there's tons of corruption in the world. That's,
yeah.
I mean, someone could tell me, hey, if you don't do this, I'm not going to give you $5,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd do it. So maybe even if they aren't on boards,
there's indirect influence.
There's indirect influence, right?
Well, the board is above everybody, pretty much, right? I mean,
right.
So like the CEO reports to.
Yeah, they have quarterly report outs to the board.
And so it's also like, well, and I mean, how many people are usually on a board of that size? Is it
It
12?
depends. They usually try and keep it an odd number because of voting purposes, because they do vote. I can't speak for sure on something that big, but I know when I was at Hertz, my previous employer, our board was 13 people big.
Okay.
Now, for example, with that Carl Icahn, who's a billionaire in the industry, he owned 35% of Hertz, and he had 4 board seats. So essentially, all he had to do was get a couple other board members on board, no pun intended. Then he could kind of dictate the move that the company would move with that.
Yeah, Carl Icahn is like, I guess he's like one of the most popular activist investors. I watched a show or documentary about the there's like some pyramid scheme company selling like shakes or something, and him and Bill Ackman, another activist billionaire, basically got in this like Bill Ackman was shorting the company, and then Carl Icahn was basically causing a short squeeze to cause Bill Ackman to lose a bunch of money just simply because they didn't like each other.
Yeah, there's the same thing going on right now with Bill Gates and Elon Musk. Like, they hate each other, and it's all because Bill has a short on Tesla stock.
Oh yeah.
And there was I don't remember exactly what's all happened, but I heard Elon make comments one day. He was like, "I will do X, Y, and Z when Bill quits shorting my stock."
Yeah. Well, Bill's getting short squeeze, or has been, I guess, not as bad anymore. It's been since Tesla's been getting hammered, but for a while there, he was probably getting squeezed and losing quite a bit of money.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, yeah, like you said, you have to get a couple people on board, I guess, with your decision. But if you're all buddies, like, hey, I'll do what you want on this, for my General Mills stock. If you do this for my Pepsi stock, or something like that. Like,
oh yeah, it's crazy. So I don't. Did you guys ever watch the show Billions by chance?
No.
So it's my favorite show. It's phenomenal, and even if you don't completely understand the stock market, it's great. But you see a lot of that where Bobby Axelrod, the main character, hotshot on Wall Street, he's kind of like a Carl Icahn, just more younger and douchier. He'll go into the board meetings that he owns significant shares in, and basically, like you said, get with your buddies and just be like, "Hey, if you vote my way, I'll make sure and turn this, $5 million fund I just got signed on, invest in your companies." And so, sure enough, boom, they invest with them. Yeah, it's a great show.
Yeah, reminds me maybe a little bit too much of the government when it comes to like passing bills and stuff. It's like, hey, I'll vote yes on your bill if you vote yes on my bill. Thanks.
It's essentially all it is.
It's all about networking, and that's what they mean when you get your job. They say it's all about networking. Well,
yeah,
it's all about the handshakes that nobody knows about.
Oh yeah.
Well, has BlackRock slowed down at all as far as like I said, I'm more knowledgeable. I say knowledgeable. I know more about the housing market with them. Have they slowed down quite a bit on that? I think they have, haven't they, with interest rates going up? I mean, I guess they pay cash for everything, so it don't matter too much.
I would guess so, that they probably have slowed down on that. Also, I doubt they pay cash for everything.
Oh, you don't think so?
No. There's a reason you look at all these massive, like Apple, their cash on hand is ridiculous. But yet, if you look at their interest they pay each, quarter, it's unbelievable how much they pay. And they don't need to. They just, in order to bump up their earnings per share, that's what they do.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm looking, and this confuses me about BlackRock. Like, yeah, they own 10 trillion in assets, most semi-indirectly through mostly their ETFs. At least 3 trillion of it are through the ETFs. But then their revenue last year was only $17.8 billion.
Yeah,
that's just because the percentages are so low on, like, it's just like low cost index fund investing is not yielding high percentage return.
Well, I guess that, when they oversee all the assets, some of that stock they may have held for years. Forever. Like, for example, the Apple stock, I looked to see, I think, what I have written down, 97 billion that they own stock in.
Mm-hmm.
Their average buy price was $38.
Oh yeah.
And I bought Apple stock when it split 2-3 years ago, and it was like 110 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to like 150, 60 now as
Yeah.
of today. So I mean, I think their average price is in the 30s. A lot of those assets they've just basically held on to for quite some time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's why you went through the revenue so small. I actually compared it. So I wrote down Apple's revenue in 2022 was 394 billion.
Gosh.
So I mean, it's an insane difference. But for comparison, kind of closer, I mentioned Hertz earlier. Hertz revenue for 2022 was only 9 billion. So in that regard, BlackRock's by revenue standpoint only twice as big as Hertz.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the assets it manages, basically manages more than every country in the world.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, why are they not making much? I guess a bunch of write-offs. They're investing in assets, so their revenue. I guess that would be profit then.
I think they don't make a lot because the asset management and index fund market is so competitive that you have basically no cost index fund investing, and so they don't technically generate a revenue. If there's a 0% management fee on a S&P 500 index fund, they don't make anything from that. But they, if I put $1,000 into S&P 500, BlackRock S&P 500, which I don't think is named that, it's named something else, then that gets divvied up whatever percent base they should have on that ETF's page. And if it's, let's just say it's evenly divided into all 500 companies, then $2 goes into all 5 companies, or 500 companies, sorry. And yeah, that, I guess it's a zero. They make nothing off of that. It's just power.
Yeah, that too. And if you compare a lot of their if you can't really compare their assets under management of the 10 trillion to their revenue, because some of them are just such long-term plays.
Mm-hmm.
When you own a lot of that stuff for 10, 15 years, you're not going to see any revenue until you sell that asset off. And they have quarterly reports that come out, maybe even monthly, of basically their movement in stocks. So it might say, let's take Apple for example. They may sell off 5 billion of Apple, but also turn around, they bought 7 billion of Apple. So there's a plus 2 billion investment in the company. And a lot of that's due to, say, your parents are getting let's say they turn 65 and they're ready to cash out in their 401k. Well, that's going to be, say if they invested in BlackRock for their 401k, then they're going to be getting that money back.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
So that's kind of why you see a lot of that transition. And
yeah,
and at that point in time, when those old people cash out, is when you see them make a profit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I guess the other big conspiracy thing, I actually think a bigger conspiracy with BlackRock is like the overall influence on entire markets. Like they really push for the ESG thing, and that's become quite overblown in markets. And that, like you said earlier, can be used to influence certain things, such as for example, Tesla is not on ESG. So ESG is the green. It's like environmental safety and governance or something like that, or social and governance. I don't know.
Yeah, they're like a governing body for basically environmentalists.
Yes, and it's either environment based or it's like social justice company based, and you can get on this nice ESG list. But Tesla wasn't on it, while Exxon and all of them were on ESG, and those that creates inflows into and raises your stock price because people invest in ESG ETFs, and so that results in your stock being inflated. And I know for a fact that they definitely influence those huge industrial spaces. I think they're one of the main catalysts behind the original ESG movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think their influence is overblown to an extent, but at the same time, I also think it's understated.
Yeah,
because they do have their hands in so much of it. Like, I mean, for example, look at Pepsi and Coke. They have significant stakes in both. They've got over 10 billion investment in both of them.
Yeah.
I mean, if they want to drive up the price of Pepsi products and Coke products, which if you want to get into what all Pepsi and Coke own, I mean, that's a long,
so
long
much.
list as well.
Yeah.
So it's like some of people's arguments as to why they are so influential in mainly the United States is because they have such a major influence on these companies that have an influence on us.
Yeah.
So, like Evan said earlier, he didn't know much about BlackRock outside of the home invasion, or not invasion, but the home buy
acquisition.
Acquisition. There you go. Good term.
Yeah.
But what people don't realize is that they've got such a significant buying power in, let's say, Chase. Well, Chase makes money every time most of us swipe our cards. Every time you swipe your card, money goes to Chase, that money goes to BlackRock. So they have like a buffer between them and the consumer, which is why most consumers are completely unaware of firms like BlackRock, Vanguard, and what's the other one? State Street.
I've never even heard of State Street.
Yeah, I hadn't either.
Yeah.
Well, so when you're investing in BlackRock 500 or Vanguard 500,
I'll just say Vanguard 500 because I know that exists. That's my basically only holding.
Yeah.
So say you invest in that, you're not actually investing in the S&P 500. You're investing in Vanguard's portion of that.
Yeah,
am I getting that right?
They. I mean, legally, I'm sure they're obligated to follow exactly what they say, but I guess technically they could. If there was someone manipulating it, they could just funnel all the money into it. Could be a big Bernie Madoff situation, but I mean they're audited and all those things.
I mean, there's instances where I want to say it was Google that I read when I was researching for this. Google has a big stake in BlackRock, but yeah, as I said earlier, BlackRock has a $26 billion stake in Google. But I mean, it's companies invest in other companies all the time. It's not.
Yeah, it seems like Google would buy into BlackRock as a sort of diversification and way for them to park their money. To me, that's what it says to me. Google is a major activist investor. I mean, they buy companies, small companies. They're not like on big public companies, but they're buying small startups all the time to as a sort of intellectual property acquisition. And who knows if they kill the projects or if they actually end up developing them. I mean, a lot of them do get developed, but I wonder.
Yeah, they have their own investment subsidiary that they pump money into.
Yeah.
Well, not to go back a little bit, but so let's say you invest in Vanguard 500. You're invested in their mutual fund, not necessarily directly in S&P 500. Let's say they were to go out of business. Do you still own that stock? I mean, obviously, sounds like BlackRock's too big to fail, but
I mean, I literally don't think that they could go out of business. They're not like levered.
I don't think so
either. The only way they could possibly go out of business is like some massive fraud, and yeah, I think that they're pretty well trusted to manage people's money. They're so diversified. If it was like out of business,
I guess complete stock market crash, like.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, you have other issues than you owning stock.
Yeah, that's exactly. And I would assume that their corporate structure is not like, pulling an FTX that's like pulling money out of certain funds to fund other ventures. I don't think they're, or at least at a high level, taking my S&P 500 investment and throwing it into cryptocurrency on the side.
Right. And I think their portfolio is so diversified that they're essentially just recession proof. Sorry, dogs want to play. Like, for example, AIG. Do you guys ever seen AIG back?
Security, home security?
AIG was another asset management firm.
Oh, okay. No, yeah.
So they're kind of part of the reason why there was a financial crisis in 2008 to begin with. They bet big on, let's see, I'm not too familiar. I don't want to misspeak. It was basically due to mortgages.
Mortgage-backed securities.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
AIG bet big on those, but then when it came out to find there was no funding there to actually be had, that's why AIG failed. But I think BlackRock and the government back in 2008 actually reached out to BlackRock to help out those who had assets with AIG at the time. Basically, kind of help them get through this, crazy movement. What's wild too is I think it's Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock. He was one of the founders and CEO. He actually helped to invent the mortgage-backed securities back in like the 90s.
Yeah.
So if you really want to get down a rabbit hole, he's not to blame for what happened in 2008 by no means, but what he invented is what caused the financial crisis.
Yeah.
I did look up. BlackRock was the largest asset manager overseeing $8 trillion, which had previously invested $24 million in FTX through a fund of funds. So
okay,
they were.
Yeah, I would say I with that fund of funds, like for me, that I just want to keep. I just want to say it's Vanguard because that's what I had. That's what I own.
Yeah.
So if Vanguard was the one that invested in FTX, then I think that portion of the investment is, something that someone is well aware of. They're investing in a fund of funds at Vanguard, and that they would lose money. Whereas I myself, I'm not going to lose money because they should have. I mean, these are the biggest companies in the world. They should have recorded like silos of corporate structure keeping money from flowing between them, which is why I think their revenue is so low. Like, they have so much under management, but the revenue is quite low because they're not pulling high risk bets all the time.
Oh yeah, they definitely diversify their investments. So if you invest $1,000, you may end up, $100 in 10 different industries. So if one industry goes bad, the likelihood of all of them going bad is very, very, very low.
Yeah.
So you're
which is one of the reasons why like mutual stocks in like your 401k are generally sought after as safe.
Yes. Generally,
yes.
If they go down, then you got bigger problems to worry about than money.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, hopefully you prepped enough. Matt, was there anything else like stats or anything that you wanted to read off that you did some research on for BlackRock?
So we covered a lot of them. The only one that I found interesting, there's probably a couple. It's just kind of an overview of the reach that they have. And the example that I saw was regarding the airline industry. People were like, oh, well, if you want to boycott BlackRock because you hate big corporate America and you don't want to fly Southwest, United, Delta, American Airlines, anything like that. Well, if you want to fly commercially, you're going to still support BlackRock because they have significant investments in Boeing and Airbus. So I thought that was kind of funny. And then another example brought back to if you wanted to shop local and say, screw big corporate America, well, you swipe your credit card. They've got Visa, MasterCard, all this other things. But probably the last stat to talk about that I found was interesting was they were the first foreign-owned company to be allowed to trade on China's mutual fund market. So out of all the companies in the entire world, China is very selective with who invests in their company or in their country. BlackRock's the only one.
That's very interesting.
Other country. Yeah, it's crazy. And that was during 2020 when they were allowed to do that. We all know China is, growing like crazy, one of the fastest growing markets in the world. I was kind of surprised to see their GDP was 17 trillion. I figured it'd be higher than that.
Well, I wonder if they were just hurting so bad because 2020 they obviously took a pretty steep dip,
right?
I think globally, and they're like, we kind of need some help. We need some leverage. We need more money.
Need some more money in the system.
In the system,
but to me, it's sketchy investing in China because you don't really know if you can trust their financial
their honesty.
Yeah. Like the companies over there, you don't really know if they're being audited, honestly.
Well, on those lines, I saw the other day that China is telling all of its firms that are, locally based, and all of its companies that are locally based in China to no longer use the big four accounting firms for their audit, tax, and advisory. So those that don't know, the big four accounting firms, Deloitte, KPMG, EY, and PwC, they do the audit work for pretty much every Fortune 500 company out there. There might be one or two that don't use them, but their audit skills are basically renowned worldwide. And China is trying to become as less dependent on America as possible. And they're trying to basically be their own silo of a economy. That's something I found fascinating.
I would never invest in a single Chinese stock if they're like, oh yeah, we don't want the American audit firms here. Like, how much fraud is probably going on underneath the hood of these companies if we're not allowed to audit them?
Oh my gosh, yeah. That's called the kids making Nike shoes.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many sketchy things with. We could do a whole episode on China and our dependence on China, for sure at some point. But yeah, it's kind of scary how we're both codependent on each other. That's the truth. But it's scary how dependent we are on some of our on them for a lot of our stuff.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, from a war standpoint, you probably want to be less dependent on somebody you're going to go to war with. I talked about that in a couple episodes back of like one of the reasons why China will never go to war with the United States is we produce a lot of the food that they eat.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have to find that elsewhere, ration quite a bit. But
do you guys think a war would ever be fought on American soil again?
I think
not an internal civil war from like a external, say someone trying to invade us.
With soldiers or robots, like drones?
Let's say soldiers for now.
No.
I think the next war that America is in will most likely somehow come onto the front lines for us here.
You really think so?
Gosh.
See,
it'll be a bloodbath, but yes.
I think as long as we don't have a civil war.
That's true.
That's true. Ruling that out. I think the United States is a geographical nightmare for anybody to try and invade. Because, I mean, no one wants to get past the Rockies. Even to get to the Rockies, you have, 55 million people in California alone to get through?
Yeah.
I mean, just let's say 1 in every 5 civilians fights back. That's still 10 million people you got to get through. Not to mention, that's just getting to the Rockies. Then once you get to the Rockies, I mean, we've all been that way. It's treacherous, hard to get through. So you get to this part of the country,
we all got guns.
Gun.
Well, I think we'd be nuked. We'd probably be nuked first.
For sure, we would be.
So, I mean,
yeah, it really is something that's not talked about very often. Is how America is the world dominant power. One of the leading reasons for that is because of its location.
Yeah,
it was away from the most destructive wars in the world. It essentially got to build its economy while all the rest of the world was reduced to rubble.
And they all have like thousands of years of just hating each other.
Yes.
We all came over 300 years ago and was like, hey, let's party. Then Canadians
are nice out
there.
Yeah, then Canadians, they write off our coattails.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons why our Navy and Air Force are the largest in the world or larger than the next 6 to 8 countries combined.
That was crazy when you told me that.
Now, though.
No. Evan was talking about this on a few podcasts ago. You were like, you read off the stat that was like bigger than the first 10 combined or some.
Yeah, insanity. Air Force for sure.
Is it their standing army is bigger than ours then?
Probably.
China's military is bigger than ours now.
Let's see.
It's very expensive to hold a standing army. That's why a lot of the countries don't have a standing army, or it's very small.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think our Navy and Air Force are the largest in the world.
Oh no, okay. Matt is right. So the Air Force, like you said, Evan, is way bigger than anyone else's by a long shot. But the China's just passed this year the U.S. Navy in size. So
yeah, I think one of the things that we have more of than other countries as far as naval power is the aircraft carrier. I think China has 4 or 5, and I think we have 12 or something like that.
I honestly think that these things are probably going to end up being worthless in the next war, because the next war is going to be fought with like drone swarms.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure the U.S. is working on this right now, but gosh, it feels like if I was a defense, if I wanted to start a defense company right now, I would be starting a drone company for sure.
For sure.
Because I think the amount of money that's about to flow into drones is going to be insane. And I think actually the Ukraine war has shown the utility of drones in at least some situations. They don't have large access to drones, but I'm pretty sure we're supplying them with some at least.
Yeah, the stat that I think I read off was the largest air force in the world is the United States Air Force. The second largest air force in the world is the U.S. Navy.
Oh, that's what it was. That's
I'm
wild.
sure Israeli Air Force, it probably isn't far behind.
Maybe, but it's such a small country that I like. Maybe per population, I could say
they're basically a extension of our Air Force.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that was a hot topic when I think we were in high school. Was like, we're giving too much money to Israel, but they also didn't talk about how much foreign aid we give to everybody. So
yeah. Well, I mean, Israel is like the only westernized country in an unwesternized region. They're a very critical point of infrastructure for us. I know all the people want to say it's just because the Judeo-Christian connection, and I'm sure there's partially because of that, but I think it's mostly because they're a strategic point in a very dangerous area.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just know it was a hot topic back then.
Yeah.
I think it might have been even part of like the 2008 debates back then. I had another topic and I completely just lost it. It wasn't on our list.
Did it have to do with drones?
No. I mean, we can talk about that a little bit. We talked about it on our earlier podcast about the Ukraine war a little slightly, and how the conspiracy theory about the Ukraine war was the United States is funneling money into the Ukraine war because they want to see how war is fought. They haven't fought like an actual
21st
century war. I mean, you have the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan.
I guess against a military superpower.
Yeah. And that was more of like guerrilla warfare. But like, how is a modern day war fought? And that was one of the reasons, or one of the conspiracy theories behind that. I don't know what your thought is on that, Matt. You've done quite a bit of research on the Ukraine war, I think.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole I go down like once a day. I don't know why. I think it's fascinating. The Russians actually caught a whole lot of crap the first really couple of months of the war, because they're saying all their tactics are things that were used 30, 40 years ago. And basically a lot of the Western powers per se were laughing at them because they were using tactics that we used back in Vietnam.
And I mean, those tactics then were just like containment, I guess. Was a big thing of just waiting things out and just patrolling areas and then getting attacked and retreating. Basically. And like I said, guerrilla warfare was a big deal.
So it's been like about a year since the original Russian invasion of Ukraine happened. And do you think we are in a better place or worse place than we were after the first week as the whole world? Or I guess we could start with Ukraine, Russia, and then US/world.
So I would say, I mean, clearly Ukraine's in a worse state.
Yeah.
I mean, their entire eastern side is demolished, which is kind of fascinating to me. Russia basically said that most of the eastern part of Ukraine all still want to be a part of Russia because going back to Soviet days, and that's the closest border to Ukraine and Russia. But then Russia was cut off by so much of the world. I think they're probably in the same state now as they, maybe a little bit worse. I don't think they'll really see the repercussions of it until 10, 15 years down the line.
Yeah.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
So a lot of companies pulled out. A lot of companies stopped doing business with them. I work in a global company, and we stopped doing business in Russia, and we closed all of our plants out there. And I think, I mean, Putin didn't, decide this overnight. It wasn't a rash decision. He knew this was coming. And for those that know the Russian model, they kind of tie this back to BlackRock. They have what are oligarchs who essentially own an insane amount of money, and they dictate. They're almost like, Russia's almost run like a corporation, where they have the president as the speaker, and then they have the oligarchs, which are the billionaires that tell him what to do.
Yeah.
Like some of those Russian oligarchs, for example, they owned yachts all around the world. Chelsea FC, the soccer team in London, they were owned fully by a Russian oligarch. A Formula One racing team was owned by an oligarch. Like their reach is insane. But I think all those people were smart enough to build up and stockpile supplies, not just military supplies, but food or seeds, things needed to make it last for 5, 10 years. That's why I think that they're fine for now, but I also don't think they expected this war to go on this long either. When Russia invaded Crimea, what was that, 2014, which used to be,
Yeah,
did
2014.
it used to be part of Ukraine? I don't want to know.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
Russia just kind of walked in, planted their roots down, and said, "Hey, this is ours." And no one really fought back. I forget the stat about how many people died, but it was very minimal. So I don't think they really expected this type of response from the Ukrainians at all. And I don't think they expected this type of response from the rest of the world either.
Yeah, I think originally Russia, this is my opinion on this, is I think Russia invaded Ukraine thinking it would be super easy, like you just said, in a Crimea style. And I think they had seen the U.S. Afghanistan withdrawal and the Taliban take back all of Afghanistan within a freaking week. And I think they thought, all right, we could do that. And then the Ukrainians had other plans, obviously. And we had other plans with that as well. I mean, without us, the Ukrainians would probably be completely taken right now, or Ukraine would be completely overrun.
Yeah, no, I agree. What fascinates me about this is there's a geopolitical expert that went on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he kind of explained the rationalization behind why Russia did what they did and why he thinks this is going to turn nuclear at some point. He was saying, I think his name's Peter Sohan or something like that. Really,
Peter Saihan?
Yes.
Yes.
He was saying that because of Cold War era times, Russia's population, they quit growing. They started decreasing. And so people were so scared they were going to get nuked throughout the Cold War that they quit reproducing. They quit having kids. And so from what he was saying, Russia's population is much higher in the 50s and 60s than it is in the teens, 20s, 30s combined. And so his whole point was he was thinking that Russia invading and trying to annex this younger population in Ukraine is a way to show their entire country that yes, they are dominant. Yes, they're going to be around for a while. People can, keep reproducing, keep making kids. But then he said as soon as, Ukraine fought back, he said at that very moment, that's when he believed that this is going to turn nuclear because Russia has basically shown to be weak.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't even overrun cities of 100,000 Ukrainians with supposedly one of the best militaries in the world.
Supposedly, yeah.
As we speak right now, they're launching their largest invasion to date. They're basically people are thinking this is their all out. Let's go. Let's get it going on. I mean, they are advancing. They are pushing through. They are capturing cities, but they've captured 4 or 5 over the last 2 weeks.
It's insane if you think about how much we saw this whole thing a year ago, and how it was on social media and the news constantly 24/7, and now I don't hear anything ever. It makes me wonder what the real state of things are right now. I mean, it seems like Ukraine is doing much better than expected, but it is very weird. Like, I didn't know that there was a massive invasion still. It seemed to me like in my head right now, there's no fighting going on. It's like a stalemate, but where no one's fighting anymore. But apparently, that's not true.
Yeah, all you hear now is basically how much more money the U.S. is giving them, and all the other countries are, oh, we're going to give you more tanks, we're going to give you more missiles. But no, as of the last couple of days, Russia has been doing their biggest advancement so far. And Bakhmut is a city in eastern Ukraine that's kind of been a hot topic. Russia is essentially trying to encircle the whole city just to force the Ukrainians back, basically saying they have them covered on the east, north, and south side. And so if the Ukrainians don't basically back out in the next few days, not back out west to recoup their vantage point, then Russia's going to have them surrounded. And yeah.
Well, if you look back in history, most of the wars that Russia won is because of the winter. So they never really had any
advantage now.
They don't have any trials. They never had any tough trials. They just waited till winter and they would just win.
And Ukrainians have terrible winters.
Ukraine has the terrible winter. Yeah, they don't have that advantage anymore.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the ways that they beat Germany so easily. I mean, obviously Germany back in World War II was fighting 2 fronts against the United States and Russia. But it was like so mistimed that when they invaded Russia, it became winter and they just couldn't survive. Like Germany just couldn't survive. And I mean, obviously they had the sheer amount of people during that time as well. I mean, they had basically like 2 people for every gun in Russia. And so somebody died in front of you, just picked up their gun. Like, so just the sheer amount of people that they had fighting then.
It is insane the amount of notable Russian history events have happened in the last 100 years.
Yeah.
Whole country collapsed.
Yeah. Has any country ever experienced this amount of historical worthy action? They've got to figure something out over there.
See America in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Yeah, we was like 4 or 5 wars.
Yeah.
Slavery.
Civil War and
War of 1812. Yeah.
But okay, so you think Russia's not going to be feeling this for another 10 to 15 years? But I myself would disagree. I feel like they're already like. I think we don't get to see inside. It's kind of like China, where it's a controlled state where we don't really see what's going on, and I cannot imagine it's normal. Like, with all those companies pulling out, all that money lost, and then with the Nord Stream pipeline blowing up, and assuming that they've lost income in their oil/gas industry because of that. I don't know if that's actually true. They might have made up for it in other places. I cannot imagine that people over there are doing too well right now.
See, I think China's the biggest player in this, because the last couple weeks has really been a big discussion of China's relation in the war. China has committed to they stay neutral. They sent out a thing a couple weeks ago, maybe about a week ago, stating basically their terms of engagement or terms of what they think should happen to, come to peace with everything. I don't remember those exact terms or by any means, but as long as China is willing to partner with them and still trade with them and keep them up, which is in China's interest. I mean, it's their neighbor. They border each other. I think they're fine. Another thing, we've talked about this off air before, is BRICS. It is I think it's Brazil, Russia, China, India. I want to say Saudi Arabia as well.
Mm-hmm.
They've all partnered together to introduce a new global currency, basically to denounce the U.S. dollar as a international trading currency for commodities like oil and gold and things of that nature. So I think if they can establish that, on top of being able to stay consistent trading partners with Russia, and if they're trying to establish that with India as well, I'd imagine India is still going to be able to trade with them. Between China and India, that's 2 billion people right there.
Yeah. But the only thing is, in geopolitics, China and India do not get along. So it surprises me that this currency thing is going on.
It's weird.
Like, have you ever seen those crazy stories about how, like, India and China have, like, some agreement from long ago that whatever the fights they have on the border territories cannot be fought with weapons. So these people are, like, fighting with, like, fist fighting and throwing rocks at each other. Like
sticks over there beating each other.
It's wild.
It's like a disputed border.
That's a easy way to get yourself attacked, though, by the U.S. is to go away from the U.S. dollar. I mean,
yeah, I think we're really going to see in the next 4 or 5 years a harsh division in the world between basically countries that support Russia in this movement and countries that don't.
Well, then that's the start up to World War III. When you start picking sides.
Well, it started because of the currency wars and how we basically entrap the world in being denominated in the U.S. dollar.
Honestly.
If you have oil and you don't use the U.S. dollar, you're getting bombed. I guarantee it.
India is one of the most interesting countries to me in all of this movement too, because they've stayed relatively neutral in everything.
Yes.
And all the UN votes that they've gone on, they've abstained from voting. So they haven't voted yes or no in terms to, sanction Russia. Mm-hmm. But they've kind of stayed there, which is a shock because historically they've always been really aligned with what the Western countries per se vote with. So, I think if India stays neutral or even chooses to align with Russia and a lot of stuff, I think you'll see a much, much harsher divide across countries across the world than people anticipate.
Yeah. I don't know. I really don't know much about this at all. But gosh, it seems like India is like the key ally for us. If we can like keep India from aligning with those groups, then I think that keeps anything from ever boiling over.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Because I don't think you can get the other ones are lost causes. Maybe Brazil. I don't know much about Brazil, but
Brazil's wild. They kind of had an election like we had this last time.
Yeah.
Where the people didn't believe that the outcome was actually what happened.
Yeah.
Kind of like here, people believe Trump actually didn't win. No way Biden won. They had one, but on a much more drastic scale, I guess you could say. I don't know a whole lot about it, but they had riots in the streets, and Brazil is an entire mess right now.
Yeah. South America is a mess.
Do what?
South America itself is like a political mess. It's crazy.
See, I don't understand why we don't just invest a whole lot of money into South America because of the abundance of natural resources they have.
Yes.
China's doing it with Africa. There's no reason we shouldn't be doing it with South and Central America.
Yep.
That's just
I could get on board with that. But okay, this new currency thing is like is very interesting to me because I remember at the very beginning of the Ukraine war, everyone was talking about it like that Russia was going to go on a gold standard or something, and it ended up obviously not happening, and much to my disappointment in my gold investments. But I don't know. I always wonder if people can actually get away, if people will ever actually be able to get away from the dollar, because what are they going to end up agreeing on? It's like you have to, unless they invent a new currency, which is speculative, it's completely speculative, but one of them has to be, or they have to decide on a currency. So is it going to be whatever the Russian, I don't know, what is it, the ruble, the yuan, or
the yen,
whatever.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, so the countries involved in this are for sure Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So not Saudi Arabia.
Oh, so I thought Saudi Arabia was with them for sure.
Yeah, I
Saudi
would have
Arabia has
thought
too
so
much
too.
oil.
Yeah.
U.S. I'm telling you, man. U.S. and oil and U.S. dollar. Yeah. I mean, crypto. It was supposed to be crypto, guys. Come on.
I still believe Bitcoin.
Your belief is in trouble.
It's doing okay. I'm not majorly invested. I have a 1% allocation in Bitcoin. But yeah, I don't know. The whole currency thing has always interested me, and I just cannot see. I can see like countries aligning together to get off the dollar, but I can't see them aligning together to get off the dollar to get on one of those countries' currency, because you essentially just move the problem to another side of the fence. So I think you either have to invent a new currency, or you have to go on a gold standard, or you have to go on like a Bitcoin / other invented currency standard.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how you would even introduce a new currency into the market. Like, what do you back it by? Like, I mean, you have to back it by gold, but or I guess
back.
oil.
Well, that's why it would be a gold standard. I guess you could do though an oil backed currency.
Between Russia and China and Brazil, they got enough oil to supply most of the world.
Yeah.
We mentioned the Nord Stream pipeline. I kind of want to circle back to that if we can. So for those that don't really know about it, it was a pipeline connecting Russia to Germany, right? And it went underneath the ocean or sea, I guess. And the consensus was that something just happened, like it just exploded last year, right? That was kind of like what was put out there. Was it just exploded?
Yeah.
And come to find out, the U.S. had a sanctioned hit on it around the start of the Ukraine war, that we just put some bombs on it and it took it out. I don't know. Do you guys know much about this?
I mean, it's a very. I mean, no one knows for sure what happened, but that's
the
like,
story. I guess what I said was the story that had come out recently.
Yes, the U.S. I mean, who are the possible suspects at play here? Why would the Russians blow up their own pipeline? That doesn't make logical sense at all. The Ukrainians do have a motivation to do that, but do they have the ability to do that? I don't know. And then there's the U.S. and the idea
known
behind
to do that kind of stuff.
the idea behind this.
We're saying, what are you talking about?
The idea behind that article that said that it was the U.S. who did it was essentially like, well, the U.S. crippled Russia's influence on Europe via their oil influence on Europe, and essentially made Europe our new natural gas vassal state. And so now now Europe becomes reliant on us for energy versus reliant on Russia. And that's essentially there's obviously a lot more details in the article. I can't remember because I read it the day it came out, but that's essentially the conspiracy in a nutshell. And the State Department or Secretary of State or whoever ended up denying this article, saying it's utterly false, but it sure is believable.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. The thing I read is saying that it was a NATO military exercise being performed being led by the U.S. Navy SEALs, and that's how they covertly went in and attached the bomb and just demoted it, or what is
Detonated.
Detonated,
yeah.
Detonated remotely. I was trying to combine those words. Detonated it remotely later on. I don't know how long ago that was, but
I remember seeing something in an article like they were performing those exercises like 3 or 4 months before. And it was like, why are there NATO exercises going on in the Black Sea? Was it the Black Sea or the Baltic Sea? I get them mixed up.
Maybe Baltic.
Baltic Sea, yeah. Why are there NATO exercises going on over there? And yeah, it seems a little bit suspect.
Yeah.
maybe we didn't exactly do it ourselves. Maybe we told someone, hey, if you look under the rug over there, there's $100. Don't do it, though.
A big plot twist would be if Canada's involved.
Canada,
They're not the same people leave them out to be. And their biggest exporter is oil. Basically,
really?
oil and timber, I would guess. So I mean,
well, that would be a Game of Thrones type shock. You have freaking Ned Stark just become the new Baelish with Canada being like some sneaky player.
What I thought was interesting was the country that came out and said that, hey, it was the U.S. was Poland. Like, I understand they're pissed they don't have heat during the winter, but they're a NATO ally. So I'm surprised when I saw that Poland was the one saying.
Was it like the Polish like prime minister or whatever said that, and then it was like redacted or something? Like he was like, oh, never mind.
Deleted the tweet. Yeah. I mean, we're in the height of a war. I say we. Ukraine's in the height of a war. We're backing them similarly to how the Korean War was, right? We backed South Korea. Was it China that backed North Korea? It's kind of similar to that a little bit. And, well, they're getting a lot of money through giving gas to Germany. Trump, during his presidency, said, we probably should figure out a different way to do this so that Europe's not reliant on Russia for their gas. Well, we can make them less reliant. Here's some detonation, some C4. We can take care of it.
Here's some extra motivation to make you less reliant on Russian gas.
What a plot twist that'd be if it was Trump himself paid for people to go blow it up.
I
told you guys. I told you.
That was actually one of the best videos I've ever seen. Whenever someone resurfaced that video of him destroying the German prime minister and them all laughing at him about him saying, "Oh, you guys are reliant on Russian energy, and that's basically stupid." And it was like, "Oh, look who ended up being right." Then.
Yeah, I mean, I work for a global company I mentioned before, and I'm in meetings constantly with a lot of the Europeans. My two above boss is based in Italy, and another person on the team is based in Denmark. They're always bringing up heat and gas issues. All for the last 6 months, that's all they've talked about.
Yeah,
and I'm like, sucks to suck. We got gas over here. Come buy it from us.
Yeah. Oklahoma natural gas, we do quite a bit of that.
Yeah, right.
Well, do you have any hot takes, Keaton or Matt, on either BlackRock, Nord Stream pipeline, or Ukraine war?
Any hot takes? I think BlackRock's only going to get bigger. I mean, if they're managing, 8 trillion, whatever it was, assets now, the market is basically a freebie. I mean, stocks are so low, it's crazy. Their influence is only going to grow. Nord Stream, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it probably wasn't America. I get the rationale behind why. It's easy to point to us. But I think when it ultimately comes out, I don't think we did it.
Well, I'm sure we had some influence. Or is that you're going to say that or no?
Yeah, it's almost like how BlackRock has influence on, other companies indirectly. I could see that being the case, but I don't think we actually did it. I think we're too easy to point the blame to for it. I don't know.
If we influenced it, though, then why aren't we? Or if we did influence it, then why aren't we kind of like releasing some evidence on someone else, the person who did it?
We have it.
We like to be the bad guy sometimes.
Yeah.
Even though we probably shouldn't be.
I don't really have any hot takes, mostly because I don't know a lot. I will say that I think that the Ukraine war has actually been, I guess you have to, you can't necessarily eliminate the existential risk of nuclear war from the equation, but if we just did, for argument's sake, it seems like we're like the big winners of this. We've weakened our, I think our second biggest enemy. Some politicians who I think are idiots think they're our first biggest enemy over China, but nonetheless, one of our biggest enemies, and we have made Europe our new vassal state on our natural gas exports. So yeah, go Oklahoma. It's a boon to our economy.
Yeah, drill baby drill. I think it goes nuclear at some point. I don't know.
Well, I think if the nuclear war happens, then that's the end of mankind. So that would be
nice knowing you.
no. It's what is the saying? It's like, I do not know what weapons World War III will be fought with, but I know World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones.
Yeah.
Because sticks and stones may break my bones.
I could see it going chemical before it ever goes nuclear. Like how in Syria, supposedly Russia was providing the chemical weapons used on the women and children by the...
Oh, yeah.
Call of Duty Modern Warfare.
Basically.
The gas. Except I think it was Germans in that. Maybe it was Russians.
No, it was.
It was Russians? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think...
You have a hot take?
I think we escalated this Ukraine war quite a bit. I mean, we all three know somebody that was in Ukraine training people to fight, sanctioned by the United States. We can talk about offline. I don't want to name drop, but we know somebody that was in Ukraine training their soldiers how to fight. I think that was a pretty big step in the wrong direction. Maybe, I guess, gaining an ally in Ukraine, one of the most corrupt countries in the world. But I think Russia is going to have to escalate for sure. The pressure's on them. Ukraine doesn't have to. The way Ukraine wins is they just hold out long enough so that Russia quits. Russia wins by conquering Ukraine.
Yeah.
So there's obviously a lot more pressure on Russia.
Russia's already come out and said they'll stop if Ukraine will just give them the Donetsk region, which is the Far East region. They want Donetsk and they want Crimea to be not disputed. They want full control of both of those, which the big benefit of both of those is they gain access to the Black Sea or Mediterranean, whichever one it is. Whatever sea is just south.
All of them. Oh, yeah. Not Mediterranean.
Is it not?
Is it? Man, I must have my geography really screwed right now.
Texas is a state, everybody. I know geography.
Let me see this on a map.
It wouldn't be Mediterranean. It'd be one of the B's.
Let's see. Black Sea, yeah.
Black.
Mediterranean is
actually is pretty close to the Black Sea, though.
Yeah, I mean, is there a canal?
Yeah, it looks like it on the map at least.
They're right there in Turkey at Istanbul.
Yep.
So I mean, you get that, and that's a whole world of trading partners.
Shipping lanes.
Russia.
Yeah. Okay. I want to say before we go, real quick, because this could end up going on for a long time. But let's answer in short form. Do you think the war would be different if Donald Trump had won in 2020?
Yeah, I don't think it happened.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. I'll think about it a little bit more if you want to give an answer.
I think it would be a lot different. I kind of think it wouldn't have happened, but I definitely don't know for sure. I was interested to see if you guys had something.
Yeah, I mean, a weaker U.S. would mean why not?
I don't think it would happen because Trump, from our viewpoint, was a lot more transparent and open about his conversations with Putin than Biden has ever been.
I think this is my take is I think it doesn't happen because Trump is a lot more of a loose cannon than Biden is.
Yeah.
It's actually it's like the worst benefit. I always say this is the worst benefit at home is actually his greatest power abroad.
Yeah.
Which is just the absolute unpredictability of the dude.
I think so too. If you look at maybe just European Russians, kind of way their ideology is they really respect power and like forcefulness and kind of aggressiveness, and that's maybe more of an Eastern European thing rather than Western Europe. But I think Trump's like when he's someone even before he's president, when he walked in a room, kind of one of those people.
Yeah.
I think that alone would go a long ways from steering.
Yeah, you actually I feel like you actually have the looming threat in the back of your mind that maybe this guy actually would nuke me.
Yeah. What was it? Was it Teddy Roosevelt? His policy was keep calm and carry a big stick.
Yes. Yeah.
Basically saying, I'm going to shut up, but if you come after me, I will destroy you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that applies now. We still have the big stick. This thing never went away. I guess you have to be likely to use it.
Yeah.
I think is what Keaton's point is, because the stick hasn't changed in size, at least as far as we know.
You got to be a little bit of a madman in foreign policy.
Because
the Mad King.
Well, somebody was talking about Russia recently, and I think I talked to you about it, Matt, the other night when we were watching the Thunder game. Was they broke the treaty, I guess, for the arms race kind of deal. I don't know exactly the treaty, but then they also said like we'll go 1-for-1 with you guys on creating nukes and creating a larger standing army and all that.
Yeah.
Which it's not to go unnoticed.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a big escalation, and then something we didn't talk about. I don't want to take a whole time, but I haven't followed it too closely, but a lot of people think that Russia is about to go into Moldova, which is on the south. It's another country on the southwest side of Ukraine. People think there's going to be a coup there, and people are trying to overthrow the government. And with that timing, people think Russia's going to attack Moldova as well because they're a non-NATO member country, which is interesting because with that, they aren't a member of NATO, but they have strongly partnered with NATO historically. So it's almost kind of like UK's connection to Europe. The whole Brexit, they don't want to be part of the EU, but they still are, inadvertent. So that one's going to be interesting to see how NATO reacts because they do have such strong ties in Moldova. But there's been a lot of buildup of Russian warships on the ports that they own on that sea.
Wow.
Well,
so if you start hearing about Moldova in the next week or two, Russia's probably going after it.
The ghost of Moldova will reappear. Yeah. The ghost of Kiev's grandson.
Ghost of Kiev. Oh my gosh.
That's so stupid.
I want to have the nice propaganda back again. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, it's still out there. Ukraine put out a thing. They've shot down 300 Russian planes like this morning. And everyone was like, no, this is one of the most documented wars in history.
Yeah.
If you shot down 300 planes, people would know.
They would know.
Well, it goes to show you even the countries that we trust still lie. So what are the countries we don't trust? How much are they lying? Anything else we want to discuss?
No, I think that covers my end. I appreciate you boys having me on.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, again,
Matt, do you have any social media you want to shout out or anything like that?
No, I don't post anything. I'm good.
Okay.
At ePeacock5 if you want to see me post a story once every 3 months.
We'll link it down below. And this has been Simply Technical. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you again on the next one.
Thank you, fellas.
Adios.